The smell hit me first. Ozone and plastic heating, that specific scent of electronics running too long. My gaming chair creaked as I shifted weight, the leather cold against the back of my neck despite the July heat seeping through my apartment window. Outside, someone's car alarm wailed 3 short bursts before dying into the city's ambient hum. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, muscle memory guiding them to keys I hadn't consciously thought about in years. Or maybe it was minutes. Time felt strange lately, like walking through a house you'd lived in as a child. Everything familiar but subtly wrong. Doorframes shorter than you remembered, hallways narrower. "Are you even listening to me?" Mira's voice pulled me back. She stood in my doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. Well, one hip cocked in that way she had when she was trying to decide between annoyed and amused. Her hair was different than I remembered, shorter, with highlights that caught the blue glow from my monitors. But then, of course it was different. She was 23 now, not 31. None of those 8 years had happened yet, except they had. For me, they had. "Sorry," I said, and my voice sounded young in my own ears. 24, to be precise. My body had been 24 for 3 months now, ever since I'd woken up in this apartment on my birthday, April 15th, 2019, with the hangover I remembered from the first time, and the certainty that I'd already lived these years once before. I said my stream setup is complete garbage. Mira walked in without invitation, her bare feet silent on my carpet. "No," she picked up a figurine from my shelf, a limited edition from some game I'd bought years ago. Or would buy. Or had bought and would buy again. The temporal grammar of living twice made my head hurt. "My laptop can barely handle streaming Stardew Valley without turning into a space heater." She was right. I remembered this conversation, though we'd had it in a coffee shop the first time, not my apartment. Some things were changing, small ripples in the current of causality. The first time around, Mira and I had been casual friends, fellow students in the digital media program at NYU. This time, I'd been different. Less closed off, more present. The kind of person who actually showed up to study groups and didn't ghost people for weeks at a time. The kind of person Mira might actually like. "You could stream here?" I heard myself say. "I've got the setup." Mira turned, still holding the figurine. In the monitor's blue light, her eyes looked darker than their usual hazel. "Your setup? Tyler, you haven't streamed in months. This equipment is just gathering dust while you—" She gestured vaguely at my 3 monitors, the middle one showing a half-written essay for Professor Chen's new media theory class. Write papers about streaming instead of actually streaming. She wasn't wrong. In my first life, I'd been obsessed with Twitch. I'd spent 20 to 30 hours a week in this chair, building an audience of 12,000 followers playing competitive shooters and battle royales. I'd made partner status by 26, the purple checkmark next to my name a badge of honor that had consumed my early 20s and destroyed my late 20s. But Mira didn't know that story. Nobody did. The only person who knew what Tyler Chen would become was Tyler Chen, age 24, living in the shadow of choices he'd already made and unmade and now had the chance to make differently. "I'm taking a break from content creation," I said, which was technically true. "For 3 months? Burnout is real." Mira set the figurine down, aligned it precisely with its neighbors. She had careful hands, steady even when the rest of her radiated nervous energy. They'd be good hands for streaming, for keyboard work and precise mouse movements. In the future, that wouldn't happen now. I'd watched her play piano at a showcase during our senior year. Those same hands pulling melody from keys with a confidence she never showed anywhere else. "So let me use your account," she said. "You're not using it? And I've been trying to build an audience for my art streams, but starting from 0 followers is like screaming into a void, you know?" I knew. God, I knew. My hand found the edge of my desk, fingers tracing the groove where I'd scratched it freshman year, trying to install a monitor arm drunk at 2 a.m. The groove was already there. I'd made it. I would make it. Had made it. The temporal vertigo hit again. "Tyler, my account has history," I said carefully. "Rules violations, old stuff from before I took the break." Mira's eyebrows rose. "What kind of violations?" The words stuck in my throat. How do you explain the person you became? The streamer who'd gotten drunk on camera 3 nights a week, who'd said things in the heat of competitive games that had gotten clipped and shared and turned into controversy. The Tyler_Chen account had accumulated strikes the way some people accumulated parking tickets, carelessly, arrogantly, with the certainty that nothing really mattered because the money was coming in and the viewer count kept climbing. Until it didn't. Until the final ban in 2027, 2 weeks before I died in a car accident on the FDR Drive. Probably still drunk from the night before, 32 years old and nothing to show for it but a banned account and a reputation as a cautionary tale in streaming communities. Minor stuff, I lied. Chat moderation issues, a couple of DMCA strikes from playing copyrighted music. Every streamer deals with that, Mira said. She moved closer, and I caught the scent of her shampoo. Something coconut-based that hadn't existed in my memory because she'd used different products when we were older. Another small detail, another fracture in the continuity of my doubled life. Look, I'm not asking to steal your account. I just need a boost, a way to start with some visibility instead of streaming to 4 people, 3 of whom are bots. I should have said no. Should have kept the Tyler_Chen account locked down, abandoned, a memorial to choices unmade. But Mira was looking at me with those eyes that I knew would someday, had already, in another timeline, looked at me with disappointment, frustration, eventually indifference as we drifted apart. We'd been friends once, the first time. This time, maybe we could be more. This time, I could be better. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air between us, a commitment I'd already broken before making it. The rain started Thursday evening, turning the view from my window into an impressionist painting of streetlights and brake lights. Water streamed down the glass in channels, each droplet following paths carved by earlier rain, earlier weather, the accumulated pattern of water finding its way down. I sat on my couch watching Mira work, a beer sweating in my hand. She'd moved her entire streaming operation into my apartment over the past week, a process that involved more cables than I'd remembered her having, several trips to and from her place in Queens, and the gradual transformation of my spare desk into her creative space. Chat's going wild for this, she said without looking away from her monitor. On screen, her digital avatar, a fox-eared girl with purple hair that she'd commissioned from an artist in South Korea, danced while Mira's hands flew across her drawing tablet. She was working on a commission, some fantasy landscape with impossible geometry and floating islands, while her viewers watched the process in real time. The Tyler_Chen account had given her exactly what she'd hoped for, a foundation. Instead of starting with 0, she'd started with 12,847 followers. My old audience, most of whom had probably forgotten I existed, but enough remembered to click on the notification when the account went live again. Tyler_Chen is back? Someone had asked in chat that first stream. This is Mira now, she'd explained, cheerful and open in a way I'd never been on camera. Tyler's letting me use the account. Same great channel. New content. Most people had stuck around. Her art streams offered something different than the toxic masculinity of competitive shooters. She was good, genuinely talented, and her commentary while drawing had a warmth that made people feel like they were hanging out with a friend rather than watching a content creator perform. In a week, she'd gained 300 new followers. In 2 weeks, 600. By the end of month 1, the account had crested 15,000, and Mira was making enough in donations and subscriptions to cover her rent. I watched her succeed and felt the weight of unearned credit. These were my followers, my platform, built on a foundation of content I hadn't created yet, and, if I was lucky, never would. Tyler, come look at this, Mira said, tilting her tablet so I could see. The landscape had evolved while I wasn't paying attention, her brushstrokes building depth and atmosphere with a confidence that came from hundreds of hours of practice. Think the composition works? The mountains feel too centered. I set my beer down and walked over, aware of chat watching. Mira had insisted on keeping her camera off. I want them focused on the art, not my face. But my apartment sometimes showed up in reflections, in the background audio of rain and city sounds that her microphone caught. Move the primary peak left, I said, pointing. Let the eye travel from the islands down to, there. Creates better flow. Ooh, Tyler's got good taste, someone wrote in chat. Is Tyler hot? Another asked. Tyler is helping me not starve as an artist, Mira said with a laugh. So yes, very hot. The chat exploded with emotes and speculation, and I retreated to the couch before I could do something stupid like blush on a hot mic. This was dangerous territory. In my first life, I'd never learned to balance closeness with professional boundaries. Every relationship had been transactional, performative, something to be monetized or leveraged for content. I dated a few people who'd appeared on stream, turned intimate moments into entertainment, wondered why things always ended badly. But Mira wasn't on stream. Not really. She was using my account, my platform, while remaining herself, or a version of herself filtered through a digital avatar and a carefully curated online persona. "Thanks for this," she said later. After she'd ended the stream and was packing up her tablet, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed and bright under a clearing sky. "Seriously, I know you said the account had violations, but everything's been smooth. No issues at all." "Yet," I said, ever the optimist. She zipped her bag, then paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You want to get food? There's that ramen place on St. Mark's that stays open late." We'd eaten there in my first life, September 2019, after a particularly brutal midterm. We'd talked about career plans and artistic dreams and all the naive confidence of people in their early 20s who thought the world would simply hand them success if they wanted it badly enough. I'd forgotten most of that conversation. It hadn't seemed important then. "Sure," I said. "I'm buying." "You always buy? You're literally giving me a show to watch every night." "Entertainment isn't free." Mira smiled, and for a moment I saw her as she would be, as she had been, 8 years older, wearing the weight of near-decade of disappointment and deferred dreams. But that was a future that might not happen now. This Mira was still young enough to believe in possibilities. "It's a deal," she said. We walked through the East Village with the post-rain smell of wet concrete and summer garbage, past bodegas with fruit displays glistening under fluorescent lights, past bars with open doors spilling music and conversation onto the sidewalk. Mira talked about her commission queue, how she'd gotten 3 new requests after tonight's stream, how maybe, she could actually make a living doing this. "You ever think about where you'll be in 5 years?" she asked. Navigating around a puddle that reflected the neon sign of a karaoke bar? "Every day," I said, which was true in a way she couldn't understand. And still figuring it out. The ramen shop was warm and crowded, steam rising from bowls and coating the windows. We squeezed into a corner table, ordered without looking at the menu, tonkotsu for her, miso for me, extra eggs for both. The same order we'd had the first time, though I didn't mention that. "You're different this semester," Mira said, wrapping her hands around a cup of green tea. "More present, like you're actually here instead of just going through the motions." "Maybe I'm just growing up. In 3 months, people can change quickly." "Or," she said, studying me over the rim of her cup, "something happened that you're not talking about." The ramen arrived, saving me from needing to answer. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who've spent enough time together to not need constant conversation. Except we hadn't. Not really. The friendship we were building now was new, even if I remembered an older version of it. "I'm applying for the partner program," Mira said suddenly. "For the account." My chopsticks stopped halfway to my mouth. "Partner? I've hit the requirements. Average concurrent viewers, hours streamed, follower count. All of it." She was excited, leaning forward, eyes bright. "If I get accepted, it means better monetization, custom emotes, priority support, real sustainability. Partner. The purple checkmark I'd earned in my first life at 26 after 2 years of grinding. Mira could get it in months, standing on my shoulders, as building on my foundation. And when Twitch reviewed the account for partner approval, they'd look at its history. All of it. Every violation, every strike, every logged incident from my future that hadn't happened yet, but had already been recorded in some database that transcended timelines. "Mira," I started. "I know it's technically your account," she said quickly, "but I thought maybe we could be partners. Like officially, split the revenue, make decisions together. You built the foundation, I'm creating the content. It could work." In another timeline, I would have laughed at the idea of sharing revenue, sharing control, sharing anything. The Tyler Chen of my first life had been fundamentally incapable of collaboration, of seeing other people as anything but competition or audience, but that Tyler Chen was dead. Nee had died drunk and alone on the FDR. I was trying to be someone different. "Let me think about it," I said. Mira's excitement dimmed slightly. "Oh, Okay, yeah, of course. Take your time. It's not a no, I said quickly. I just need to check some things. About the account, old business stuff. The violations you mentioned. Yeah. She nodded, accepting this, and we finished our ramen talking about other things, upcoming assignments, mutual friends, a concert she wanted to see at Brooklyn Steel, normal conversation between normal people living normal lives. But I wasn't normal. I was a ghost haunting my own youth, trying to rewrite a story I'd already lived. And ghosts, I was learning, couldn't change everything. My laptop sat open on my desk at 2 a.m., the screens glow the only light in my apartment. Outside, the city had quieted to its late-night frequency, distant sirens, the occasional shout, the bass rumble of someone's music. Inside, I was sweating despite the air conditioning, my finger hovering over the mouse, cursor poised on the link I'd been avoiding for 3 months. Twitch account settings, privacy and safety, violation history. I'd convinced myself the reset had been clean, that when I'd woken up on April 15th, 2019, in a body 8 years younger, the slate had been wiped. My old violations, my old bans, the accumulated record of my worst self. Surely that existed only in my memory, in a future that wouldn't happen now. But I'd been too afraid to check, until Mira had mentioned partner, until the weight of my cowardice had become heavier than the weight of knowing. I clicked. The page loaded slowly. My internet connection turning data into visual information, binary code into the record of who I'd been. Or would be. Or was. Violation history, Tyler_Chen. My eyes scanned the list and my stomach dropped. March 15th, 2024. Strike 1, hateful conduct, overturned on appeal. June 3rd, 2024. Strike 2, harassment and threatening behavior. August 17th, 2025. Strike 3, repeated DMCA violations, November 2nd, 2025. 30-day suspension, intoxication on stream, January 8th, 2026. Strike 4, sexual content, overturned on appeal, April 22nd, 2026. 90-day suspension, targeted harassment, September 30th, 2026. Strike 5, hate speech, February 14th, 2027. Permanent ban, accumulated violations, terms of service breach. All there. Every mistake, every drunken rant, every moment of cruelty I'd shown to other streamers, to viewers, and to anyone who'd challenged me in the toxic echo chamber I'd built. All logged, time-stamped, existing in a database that apparently transcended the linear flow of causality. None of it had happened yet. I'd been careful this time, had barely touched the account. But in some quantum sense, in some administrative record that existed outside of normal time, Tyler Chen had already been banned. The violations were future dated, 5 to 8 years ahead, but they existed in the system now, visible to anyone with the right access, including the partner program review team. I closed the laptop and sat in darkness, listening to my own breathing. The logical part of my brain tried to work through the implications. Maybe Twitch's systems wouldn't flag future-dated violations. Maybe the review process only looked at current status. Not predictive data. Maybe whatever cosmic accident had sent my consciousness back 8 years had created an inconsistency in their databases that would be ignored or dismissed as a bug. Maybe. But I'd built a career, a failed career, but a career nonetheless, on understanding platform algorithms and moderation systems. I knew how thorough partner reviews were. They looked at everything, cross-referenced everything, ran accounts through multiple screening processes to protect the brand. And even if the future violations didn't show up in automated checks, the account was flagged. I could see it in the system. A small red icon next to my username, a marker that meant manual review required, elevated risk, proceed with caution. My phone buzzed. A text from Mira. Can't sleep? Keep thinking about partner app? Submitted it? Fingers crossed. I stared at the message, typed several responses, deleted them all, finally settled on, that's great. Hope it works out. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, you okay? You seemed weird at dinner. Just tired. Long week. Liar, but okay. Get some sleep, Tyler. I set the phone down and returned to the laptop, opening it again to stare at the violation history. 5 years of mistakes compressed into a single screen. 5 years that hadn't happened yet but had somehow already been judged and recorded. In my first life, I'd never believed in fate, in destiny, in any force beyond human choice and random chance. But how else could you explain this? A database that knew my future. A record of sins I hadn't committed yet, but apparently couldn't escape. Unless I opened a new browser tab. I navigated to Twitch's appeal system. Each violation had an appeal button next to it, even the ones dated years in the future. I clicked on the first one, March 2024, hateful conduct, and read the details. The incident had happened during a stream of Valorant. I'd gotten into an argument with another player, said things about their skill that had crossed the line into personal attacks. Someone had clipped it, reported it. I'd appealed, argued context, gotten the strike removed. But here, now, 5 years before it would happen, the violation existed in 2 states, active and overturned, simultaneously struck and forgiven. I clicked Submit Appeal and wrote, "This violation is dated in the future. It hasn't occurred yet. I'm requesting removal based on temporal impossibility." The form accepted my appeal, gave me a ticket number. The estimated response time, 5 business days. I went through the list systematically, appealing every violation on the same grounds. By 4 a.m., I'd submitted 8 appeals for events that wouldn't happen for years, arguing against my own future in paragraphs of careful legalese. The absurdity of it hit me somewhere around appeal number 6. I was arguing with a database about my own past, which was my future, which hadn't happened yet but had somehow already been judged. I was trying to convince an automated system that I was innocent of crimes I hadn't committed yet, but that I knew with absolute certainty I would commit if I lived my life the same way again. Which I wouldn't, which I was actively trying not to do. But the system didn't care about my intentions. It cared about data, timestamps. So it logged events in a database that apparently existed outside of normal causality. I submitted the final appeal as dawn light started filtering through my window, turning the city from black to gray to gold. My hands were shaking. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean, like I'd spent the night performing surgery on my own history. My phone buzzed again. Mira. "You're up early? Coffee?" I looked at the message, at my laptop screen with its 8 pending appeals, at the sunrise painting my apartment in colors that felt too bright for how I felt inside. "Sure," I typed. "Usual place?" "Meet you there in 20. I closed the laptop and went to shower, trying to wash away the feeling that I'd just sealed our fate instead of changing it. The coffee shop on 7th Street had a crack in the front window, held together with packing tape, mist that refracted the morning light into spectrums. I sat watching colors dance on my table while waiting for Mira, my hands wrapped around a cup of dark roast and that was too hot to drink but perfect for holding. The barista, a guy named Marcus, who I'd gotten to know in both timelines, had his own playlist going, something electronic and ambient that filled the space between espresso machine hisses and the door chime announcing new customers. The scent of coffee mingled with the yeasty smell from the bakery next door, creating an olfactory landscape I associated with early mornings and deadline stress and the particular anxiety of being 24 years old and trying to figure out life. Except I'd already figured it out once, had lived to 32, failed spectacularly, and been given the universe's strangest gift, a second chance to fail differently. Mira arrived in a burst of energy, her hair still wet from a shower, wearing an oversized hoodie that I recognized from our first timeline as her comfort outfit for anxiety days. "Okay, I'm freaking out," she said before even sitting down. "The partner application went through to manual review. They're looking at the account right now. Like actual humans reviewing Tyler_Chen to decide if I'm worthy of the sacred purple checkmark. My coffee cup became very interesting. That's fast. Right? I thought it would take weeks, but apparently they've been streamlining the process." She ordered a matcha latte from Marcus, then turned back to me with an expression caught between excitement and terror. What if they say no? What if they look at my art streams and decide it's not the kind of content they want to promote? "Your content is good," I said automatically, "but is it good enough? Is anything ever good enough?" She laughed, a sound with sharp edges. "Sorry, anxiety spiral, you know how I get." I did know. Had known, would know. The temporal grammar was giving me a headache again. Marcus brought Mira's matcha, and she wrapped her hands around it the same way I held my coffee, seeking comfort and warmth in the simple physics of heat transfer. We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient music filling the space between us. "Tyler," she said finally, "those violations you mentioned, how bad are they really?" My hands tightened on my cup. "Why?" Because if they're going to affect the partner review, I need to know. I need to be prepared for whatever they find. Honesty warred with self-preservation. I could tell her everything about the future I'd lived, the person I'd been, the mistakes I'd made and would make and was trying desperately not to make again. But how do you explain living twice? How do you make someone understand that you carry the weight of a future they haven't experienced? They're not your violations, I said instead. They're mine. If Twitch has a problem, it's with me, not you. But I'm using the account. As a favor to me. Tyler. She set down her matcha with more force than necessary, creating a small splash. Stop being noble or protective or whatever this is. Just tell me what I'm walking into. So I told her. Not everything. Not about dying, not about living twice, but enough. About the strikes I'd accumulated in my past, future, about getting too drunk on stream, about saying things in competitive games that had crossed lines, about the slow accumulation of violations that had eventually led to a ban. When? She asked. Does it matter? Yes. If it's recent, it's one thing. If it's ancient history, maybe they'll overlook it. It's complicated, I said, which was the understatement of my double lifetime. Mira studied me across the table, her artist's eye taking in details I probably wasn't aware of showing, the way I wouldn't meet her gaze, the tension in my shoulders, the coffee cup I was gripping like it might anchor me to reality. You know what's going to happen, she said. It wasn't a question. You've got that look you get when you know something but don't want to say it. Like when you recommended I take Professor Martinez's class, even though registration hadn't opened yet and none of us knew what she was teaching. Or when you told me not to waste money on that art software subscription because a better deal was coming. You know things, Tyler. I don't understand how, but you do. My heart was hammering. This was the closest anyone had come to seeing through the illusion of my second life. The closest anyone had come to asking the question that would unravel everything. I do research, I said weakly. Bullshit. But she said it gently, without accusation. Look, I don't need to understand your weird precognitive thing or whatever it is, but I need to know. Are they going to reject the partner application because of your old violations? The appeals I'd submitted at 4 a.m. felt very far away. Need 8 chances for Twitch to recognize a temporal anomaly and fix it. 8 lottery tickets against fate. Probably, I admitted. Mira absorbed this, took a sip of matcha, watched the cracked window refract light into colors. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, controlled. Okay, then I'll start fresh. Build a new account from scratch. It'll take longer, but I'll get there eventually. Mira, it's fine, really. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I appreciate you letting me use the account. It gave me a boost, helped me learn how to stream, build some confidence. But if the account has baggage, better to cut loose now than deal with drama later. She was being reasonable, mature, exactly the kind of response I should have hoped for, but all I felt was the weight of failure. The knowledge that I'd offered her something that would hurt her, that my attempt to help had just been another form of damage. I'm sorry, I said. For what? Having a past? Mira shook her head. We all have histories, Tyler. Yours is just, apparently, very thoroughly documented. Marcus's playlist shifted to something with a piano melody, delicate and sad. Through the cracked window, the morning sun climbed higher, burning off the night's coolness, promising another hot July day in a city that felt too small for the weight of everything I was carrying. I submitted appeals, I heard myself say, last night, for all the violations, arguing that they should be removed. Will it work? I don't know. But you have a guess. I met her eyes finally. Saw her watching me with an expression that mixed frustration and fondness, and something else I couldn't quite name. No, I said. I don't think it will work. Mira nodded slowly, accepting this. Then we wait and see. Maybe your appeals go through. Maybe Twitch doesn't care about old violations. Maybe the universe will surprise us. She finished her matcha, stood up, shouldered her bag. I've got class in an hour. Walk me to the subway? We left the coffee shop together, the door chime marking our exit, and headed toward Astor Place through streets already filling with the day's traffic. Mira talked about her commission queue, about an idea she had for a new stream series, about anything except the partner application and the violations and the future I could see but couldn't quite prevent. At the subway entrance, she paused. Hey, to Tyler, whatever happens with the account, thanks for being weird and mysterious and somehow always knowing things you shouldn't. It's actually kind of comforting. She went down the stairs before I could respond, disappearing into the underground system that would carry her to class, to her future, to whatever life she'd build in a timeline I was trying to reshape. I walked home slowly, taking the long route, past parks where children played and street vendors sold fruit, and the city displayed all its chaotic vitality. My phone buzzed with notifications I ignored. The morning stretched into afternoon, hot and bright and indifferent to my anxiety. When I finally checked my email, there were no responses from Twitch about my appeals, but there was one new message. The subject line, Partner Program Application Update. I read it standing on the sidewalk, people flowing around me like water around a stone. The review had been completed. The Tyler_Chen account had been flagged for elevated risk. The partner application had been denied. And because of the severity of violations in the account history, Mira's access to the account had been permanently revoked. The email's clinical language couldn't mask what had happened. I'd gotten Mira banned from an account that had been helping her build a career. The Tyler_Chen username would remain on Twitch, locked and flagged, a digital monument to future mistakes I'd tried and failed to prevent. And Mira, who'd done nothing wrong, you who'd created beautiful content and built a community and poured her creative energy into streams that made people happy. Mira had been caught in the blast radius of my past, or future, or whatever the hell this was. I called her, straight to voicemail, texted her, "We need to talk." No response. Walked to her apartment in Queens, took the subway 40 minutes to a part of the city where the buildings were shorter and the streets wider, and the whole place felt less like Manhattan and more like the outer borough's particular brand of working-class diversity. Her building was a walk-up with a broken intercom, so I waited outside like a stalker until someone came out and I caught the door. 4th floor. Her apartment shared a wall with neighbors whose TV was loud enough to hear through the plaster, some reality show with shouting and dramatic music. I knocked on Mira's door, then knocked again when there was no answer. "Go away, Tyler." So she was home. That was something. I need to explain. The email explained everything. Account flagged, violations, access revoked. Very clear, actually. "Let me in. Please." A long silence, punctuated by canned laughter from the neighbor's TV. Then the deadbolt clicked and the door opened enough for Mira to look out, her face carefully neutral. 5 minutes, she said. Her apartment was small, a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom behind a folding door. She'd made it hers with art prints on the walls, plants on every available surface. A workstation by the window where her drawing tablet sat dark and unused. The space smelled like jasmine incense and the lavender spray she used on her pillows to help her sleep. I'd been here before, in my first life. This same apartment, though arranged differently, decorated with different prints. We'd been here after that showcase where she'd played piano, both drunk on cheap wine and the invincibility of youth. Nothing had happened. We'd talked until dawn and I'd slept on her couch, but I remembered the feeling of possibility, of a friendship that could have become more if I'd been capable of more. "Talk?" Mira said, crossing her arms. So I told her everything. Not in order, not coherently, but in a rush of confession that included dying in a car accident at 32, waking up at 24, living these months with the weight of 8 extra years in my head. I told her about the Tyler_Chen account in my first life, about partner status and toxic streams, and the slow decay of a person who measured worth in viewer counts and sub-revenue. I told her about the violations I hadn't committed yet, but had already been logged, about a database that apparently existed outside of time, about appeals that had gone nowhere because how do you appeal your own future? Mira listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finally ran out of words, we stood in her small apartment with the sounds of reality TV bleeding through the walls and the city humming outside her window. "That's insane," she said finally. "I know. Like, actually insane. The kind of thing you should see a therapist about. Kaya, not dump on your friend at 6 p.m. on a Thursday." "I know." "And you expect me to believe this? That you're some kind of time traveler from your own future?" I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, showed her a file I'd created in April. It was dated predictions, things I'd written down to prove to myself this was real. Small events, easy to verify. The date Professor Martinez would announce her new course. May 3rd, 3 weeks before registration opened. The exact score of a basketball game between teams neither of us followed, Nets 108, Celtics 106, May 15th. The name of the new coffee shop that would open on 9th Street, Constellation Coffee, June 2nd. The announcement that a beloved character would die in a TV show we both watched, June 20th, episode 8. All accurate? All time-stamped weeks or months before the events occurred. Mira scrolled through the list, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. Skepticism, confusion, something that might have been fear. "This could be fake," she said. "You could have edited the timestamps." "I could have, but I didn't." She handed back the phone and walked to her window, looking out at Queens stretching toward the horizon, buildings and streets, and the complicated geometry of a city built by millions of decisions. The evening sun painted everything gold, beautiful and indifferent. "Let's say I believe you," she said without turning around. "Let's say you really did live until 32 and somehow got sent back. That means you knew this would happen. You knew the account was flagged, knew I'd get banned, and you let me do it anyway. I hoped it would be different this time, but you knew it wouldn't be." "I didn't know, not for certain." Now she turned, and the look she gave me was sharp enough to cut. "Yes, you did. You said it yourself this morning. Probably. You knew, and you let me invest weeks of work. Let me build hope. Let me think I was finally catching a break. And for what? So you could feel better about your past? So you could prove you'd changed? I was trying to help. By giving me something poisoned," Mira laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "That's not help, Tyler. That's just another form of selfishness." The words hit like physical blows. Because she was right. I'd known the risks, had seen the violations in the system, had spent a night submitting appeals I knew wouldn't work. And I'd let Mira continue anyway. Let her apply for partner, let her dream about sustainability and growth, all while carrying the knowledge that it would probably end exactly like this. "I'm sorry," I said. "Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" "Both. Probably both." Mira turned back to the window. The sun was setting now, the gold light deepening to orange, to red, to the purple that preceded night. Outside, someone was playing music, something with a reggaeton beat that pulsed through the summer evening. "I need you to leave," she said quietly. "Mira, please, just go. I need to think." I wanted to argue, to explain, to somehow make her understand the impossible position I was in. But what could I say that I hadn't already said? What defense could I offer that wouldn't sound like another excuse? So I left. So walked down 4 flights of stairs and out into the Queen's evening, where the city continued its evening routine indifferent to my personal apocalypse. I took the subway back to Manhattan, crowded against strangers in the mechanical intimacy of shared transit, emerged in the East Village to streets that felt too familiar, too much like home, too much like a trap I'd built for myself. My apartment was dark and quiet. I sat on my couch without turning on lights, watching the city's glow filter through my windows, listening to the sounds of other people's lives happening around me. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Twitch support. Your appeals have been reviewed and denied. Account status remains flagged. This decision is final." I read the message 3 times, then threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack, fell to the floor, and continued working because of course it did. Because nothing in this second life was allowed to break cleanly. I didn't hear from Mira for a week. 7 days of silence punctuated by unsent texts I'd type and delete, voicemails I'd draft mentally but never record. I went to class and sat in the back row, watched Professor Chen, no relation, talk about new media theory and the performative nature of online identity, and thought about how I was living proof of her thesis. I was performing Tyler Chen, age 24, while simultaneously being Tyler Chen, age 32, posthumous, trying to reconcile 2 lifetimes into something coherent. The attempt was failing. On day 8, Mira showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway. Hands in her hoodie pockets, hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd been sleeping about as well as I had. "I need to see it," she said without preamble. "See what?" "Your violation history, all of it. If I'm going to process this, I need to understand what kind of person you were. Or will be. Or whatever." I stepped aside, let her in. My apartment looked like I felt. Disheveled, neglected, The accumulation of a week spent not quite functioning. Dishes in the sink, laundry on the floor, the blinds closed against sunlight that felt too bright for my current state of existence. Mira wrinkled her nose. Jesus, Tyler, when's the last time you opened a window? What day is it? Thursday. Then probably last Thursday. She moved through the space, opening windows, creating cross-ventilation that brought in the sounds and smells of the city. Fresh air, the promise of life happening outside my depression cave. When she finished, she turned to me expectantly. Show me. I got my laptop, opened it to the violation history page I'd been staring at on and off for the past week, handed it to her without comment, watched her face as she scrolled through 5 years of my worst behavior, time-stamped and categorized and preserved for digital eternity. Hateful conduct, she read aloud. Harassment, intoxication on stream, sexual content. She looked up. Jesus Christ, Tyler, what happened to you? Success, I said, or what I thought was success. 12,000 followers became 20,000, 20 became 50, I made partner, started earning real money, and somewhere in there I started believing my own hype. Started thinking the rules didn't apply to me, started drinking on stream because viewers thought it was funny, started saying things in competitive games because my chat ate it up, clip-chimped it, turned my toxic masculinity into content. And nobody stopped you? People tried. Mods quit, viewers complained, other streamers called me out, but there were always new mods, new viewers, new people willing to excuse anything because the content was entertaining. I sat down heavily on my couch. The algorithm rewarded engagement, and nothing gets engagement like controversy, so I leaned into it, became the villain, made it my brand. Mira kept scrolling, reading violation details, appeal outcomes, the slow progression toward inevitable ban. February 2027. Permanent ban. That's when you died? 2 weeks after. Drunk driving? Probably. I don't remember. Just remember leaving a bar, getting in my car, and then waking up here 8 years younger with a chance to do everything differently. I laughed, a sound without humor. Except I can't even do that right. Can't escape my own past because it's apparently hard-coded into Twitch's database, existing outside of normal causality. That's not how databases work, Mira said. I know, but here we are. She closed the laptop and set it aside, then sat in my gaming chair, the one I'd spent thousands of hours in during my first life, building an audience and destroying my future. She spun it slowly, the way she did when she was thinking. Tell me about your first life, she said. Our first life, what happened with us? The question I'd been dreading. So we were friends, good friends for a while, but I was not great at maintaining relationships. Got too focused on streaming, on growth, on metrics. We drifted apart junior year. I barely saw you senior year. Graduated, lost touch completely. I didn't even know what happened to you after NYU. Did you care? I didn't let myself. Caring about people interfered with the grind, with the content schedule, with the persona I was building. So I stopped caring about anything except viewer counts. And that worked out well for you. Obviously. Mira stopped spinning the chair and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. So, this time, you decided to be friends with me again. To be present, helpful, supportive. To offer me your account as a boost. Yes. Because you felt guilty about how things went the first time? Because I wanted a chance to do better, to be better. But you're not better, Tyler. You're just the same guy with more information. You still made a selfish choice, still prioritized your own needs over mine. You wanted to feel like a good person, so you gave me something you knew was broken. The words were harsh but accurate. I'd spent a week trying to build a defense, trying to frame my choices as noble, or at least well-intentioned. But Mira was cutting through the bullshit with the precision of someone who'd spent years learning to see through surfaces, to structure, to composition, to the truth beneath the performance. You're right, I said. I know I'm right. The question is whether you actually understand why, or whether you're just agreeing because it's easier than arguing. I thought about this, really thought about it, instead of jumping to an answer that would make me look better or end the conversation faster. I think, I said slowly, I've been treating this second life like a game. Like, I can min-max my way to a better ending if I just make the right choices, help the right people, avoid the right mistakes. But people aren't NPCs and life isn't a speed run. I can't just optimize my way to redemption. No, you can't. Mira stood up, walked to my window, looked out at the East Village going about its afternoon. But you can be honest. You can stop trying to control outcomes and just exist. Be present, be flawed, be the messy, so complicated person you actually are instead of the reformed version you're trying to perform. Is that what I'm doing? Tyler, you've been performing your whole life. Both lives. The toxic streamer was a performance. The reformed friend is a performance. When are you going to stop acting and start being? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't know how to process. Outside, someone was shouting in Spanish, the words rapid and angry. A car horn blared. The city continued its chaotic symphony, indifferent to my existential crisis. I don't know how, I admitted. Then figure it out. Mira grabbed her bag, headed for the door. But figure it out honestly without involving me. I need space, Tyler. From you, from this whole situation. Maybe permanently. Mira, wait. She paused in the doorway, looked back. One more thing. Those predictions you showed me? The dated events that proved you're telling the truth? Yeah? Stop doing that. Stop using your future knowledge to prove things, to impress people, to make yourself seem special. It's just another form of performance. Another way of controlling how people see you. But without that, how will anyone believe me? Maybe they won't. Maybe that's the point. Maybe you need to learn to exist without proof, without validation, without an audience confirming that you matter. She left before I could respond, her footsteps fading down the hallway, the building's outer door closing with a heavy thud that I felt in my chest. I sat alone in my apartment, windows open, city sounds filtering in, and tried to remember what it felt like to exist without performing. To just be Tyler Chen, without the weight of 2 lifetimes, without the burden of future knowledge, without the desperate need to prove I'd changed. I couldn't remember. Maybe I'd never known. The appeals kept getting denied. Every few days, another email from Twitch support, another form letter explaining that account violations stood, that the decision was final, that no further appeals would be processed. I stopped reading them after the 5th one, let them pile up in my inbox like evidence of my failure. Classes continued. Summer session gave way to fall semester. I went through the motions of being a student, attending lectures, submitting assignments, participating in discussions about digital media theory and the ethics of online performance. Every class felt like a personal attack. Every reading about platform accountability and creator responsibility a mirror held up to my worst self. I saw Mira around campus, but we didn't talk. She'd started a new Twitch account, Mira Creates, and was streaming again, building from 0 followers. I watched sometimes, lurking anonymously, seeing her create the same beautiful art, the same warm community, the same version of herself that had succeeded on my account. Except it was better now, fully hers, untainted by my history. I thought about streaming again myself, setting up a new account, starting fresh, using my future knowledge to jumpstart growth. I even went so far as to create a new username, Phoenix Rising, because apparently I had no sense of irony, before deleting it. Because what was the point? I'd just become the same person, make the same mistakes, end up in the same place. Some patterns I was learning were harder to break than others. October brought cold weather and shorter days. I started spending more time in my apartment, less time in class. Professor Chen emailed asking if everything was okay, if I needed an extension on my midterm paper. I wrote back something vague about personal issues and promised to turn it in soon. I didn't. The paper sat half-finished on my laptop, a critique of parasocial relationships in streaming culture that I was uniquely unqualified to write, having lived both sides of it. How could I critique something I'd weaponized? How could I analyze toxicity I'd embodied? My drinking increased. Not on stream. I wasn't streaming, but alone in my apartment, working through a bottle of whiskey while watching other people's content. I told myself it was different this time, that drinking alone was better than drinking for an audience, that privacy meant I was in control. But control was an illusion, had always been an illusion. One night, or maybe it was 3 a.m., the line was blurry, I found myself on Mira's stream again. She was drawing a commissioned piece, something fantastical with dragons and impossible architecture, her avatar smiling while her hands created beauty on screen. "Chat's asking about Tyler again," she said, reading messages I couldn't see. "Y'all are obsessed. Tyler and I aren't friends anymore, okay? We had a falling out. It happens. People drift apart. Someone asked if it was because of the banned account. Partially, Mira said carefully, but more because, I don't know. Sometimes you realize you don't really know someone as well as you thought, that the version of them you liked was just a performance. I closed the stream and opened Twitter, started typing a drunk thread about platform accountability and second chances and how databases shouldn't exist outside of linear time. Got 3 tweets in before deleting them all. Because what was I trying to prove? That I deserved sympathy? That my situation was uniquely unfair? The universe had given me the rarest gift, a second chance at life. And I was wasting it, spiraling into the same patterns, becoming the same person I'd been before. The only difference was the timeline. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the coffee shop barista. Haven't seen you around? You good? I stared at the message. Thought about responding honestly. Thought about explaining that I wasn't good, had never been good, that I was a cosmic mistake given human form. But what would that accomplish except worry Marcus, who was just being nice, who probably asked all the regulars the same question when they disappeared for a while? Just busy with school, I typed back. I'll come by soon. I wouldn't. The bottle was empty. I didn't remember finishing it. Didn't remember much of anything except the feeling of failure, of wasted potential, of being trapped in a loop I couldn't escape no matter how many times I lived through it. I fell asleep on the couch, lights on, laptop open, the city humming outside my window in frequencies I could feel in my chest. I woke to pounding on my door and light too bright for my hangover. Stumbled up, kicked over the empty whiskey bottle, navigated to the door without bothering to check who it was. Marcus stood in my hallway holding a paper bag and a look of concern. You look like shit, he said. Thanks. Can I come in? I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, kept my spiral private, not dragged other people into my mess. But I was tired of being alone with my thoughts, and Marcus was already pushing past me into my apartment. Jesus Christ, Tyler. He set the bag on my counter. Coffee and bagels, the smell making my stomach turn. When's the last time you opened a window? Cleaned? Existed in a space that didn't smell like despair? Eloquent. I'm a barista with an English degree. Eloquence is my brand. He started opening windows, creating cross-ventilation the same way Mira had. Talk to me. What's going on? So I told him. Not everything, not about dying, not about living twice, but about the Twitch account, about letting Mira use it, about the violations and the ban and the way I'd hurt someone I cared about through my own selfishness. Marcus listened while making coffee, moving around my kitchen like he owned it, finding mugs and cream and the sugar I didn't remember buying. When I finished, he handed me a cup and sat across from me at my small table. So you fucked up, he said. Yeah. And now you're punishing yourself by becoming a hermit alcoholic? I'm not an alcoholic. Marcus gestured at the empty bottle on my floor. Sure, and I'm not gay, I just exclusively sleep with men. Despite everything, I laughed. Point taken. Look, Marcus said, serious now, I don't know what's going on with you, but I've watched you come into my shop for months. And you've always seemed like, I don't know, someone carrying something heavy, and now you're letting it crush you. Maybe I deserve to be crushed. Maybe. Or maybe you're just depressed and looking for meaning in suffering because it's easier than actually fixing things. He sipped his coffee. Have you apologized to Mira? She told me she needs space. That's not what I asked. I hadn't apologized properly, hadn't taken responsibility beyond vague expressions of regret. I'd been too busy drowning in self-pity to actually do the work of making amends. No, I admitted. So start there. Write her a letter, email, text, whatever, not to get her to forgive you. She might not, but to actually take responsibility. Or to acknowledge the harm you caused without making it about your feelings. And then? Then you get your shit together, go to class, stop drinking alone, maybe talk to a therapist about why you keep sabotaging yourself. I can't afford therapy. NYU has counseling services, free for students. Marcus finished his coffee, stood up. Look, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying it because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same spiral, and the only way out is to stop performing suffering and start actually healing. He left before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone with coffee and bagels and the uncomfortable realization that everyone in my life could see through my bullshit except me. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, opened all the windows, let November air flow through, cold and sharp and cleansing, did dishes, laundry, threw out the empty bottles that had accumulated over the past weeks, scrubbed surfaces, vacuumed, organized the chaos into something resembling order. Physical space first, mental space next. That evening, I opened my laptop and started writing to Mira. Not a text, not a short message, but a proper letter. I wrote about my selfishness, about how I'd used her to feel better about my own failures, about how I'd prioritized my need for redemption over her actual well-being. I wrote without trying to explain or justify, without making myself the victim, without asking for forgiveness. I wrote to take responsibility. It took me 3 hours and dozens of drafts before I had something that felt honest. I read it over one more time, made a few final edits, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened NYU's counseling services website and scheduled an appointment. Then I opened my calendar and added all my assignment deadlines, color-coded by urgency. Then I made a plan for the next day. Wake up early, go to class, stop at Marcus's coffee shop, come home and work on the paper that was 3 weeks overdue. Small steps, manageable pieces, the opposite of grand gestures and dramatic changes. Mira didn't respond to my email. I hadn't expected her to. The point wasn't reconciliation. The point was accountability. I went to class the next day, submitted the overdue paper a week later, started seeing a therapist named Dr. Rodriguez, who listened to my carefully edited version of events and asked thoughtful questions about patterns and choices and the gap between who I wanted to be and who I was. "You talk a lot about wanting to change," she said in our third session, "but change requires more than wanting. It requires action, consistency, uncomfortable honesty with yourself." I'm trying. Are you, or are you trying to try? The question sat with me for days. Because she was right. I'd been performing the idea of change without actually doing the work. Cleaning my apartment wasn't healing. Attending class wasn't growth. I was still the same person, just better disguised. Real change would require confronting things I didn't want to confront. Like why I'd built my identity around streaming in the first place. Like why I measured my worth in viewer counts and follower metrics. Like why I couldn't seem to exist without an audience validating my existence. November became December. Finals approached. I studied, took exams, survived the semester through sheer momentum. Saw Mira at the final class we shared, but we didn't speak. She'd cut her hair shorter, looked tired but determined, was building her new channel slowly and steadily without shortcuts or borrowed platforms. I envied her that. The clean slate, the fresh start, the ability to be fully herself without the weight of violation history or second chances or knowledge of futures that hadn't happened yet. On the last day of finals, I went to Marcus's coffee shop and ordered my usual. He made it without asking questions, then slid a paper across the counter with it. "Yo, what's this?" "Group meeting info. AA meets in the basement of that church on 10th Street. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7. Marcus, I'm not saying you need it. I'm saying it's there if you want it. Sometimes talking to other people who've struggled helps more than talking to yourself." He smiled. "Or talking to your overworked barista therapist." I took the paper, folded it carefully, put it in my pocket. "Thanks. That's what friends do." Friends? The word felt foreign. I'd had followers, fans, viewers, subscribers. But friends? People who showed up without incentive, who cared without content, who stayed when things got hard. I wasn't sure I knew how to have those, but maybe that was something else I could learn. I didn't go home for winter break. My parents had called, suggested I come back to California, spend the holidays with family. I'd made excuses about needing to stay in New York for work, for projects, for reasons that were technically true, but practically evasions. The truth was I couldn't face them. Couldn't sit at their dinner table knowing I was living a second life they had no knowledge of. Couldn't watch them interact with 24-year-old Tyler while carrying memories of phone calls from 30-year-old Tyler, drunk and desperate, asking for money I'd already wasted. Those calls hadn't happened yet in this timeline. Might never happen if I stayed on track. But the guilt was the same. So I stayed in New York, in a city that emptied of students and filled with tourists, where December brought cold that made my bones ache and early darkness that made every day feel shorter than it was. I went to the AA meeting Marcus had recommended, sat in a church basement on folding chairs while people shared stories of addiction and recovery, of hitting bottom and climbing back up, of the daily work of staying sober. I didn't share, wasn't ready to speak, wasn't sure what I'd say, but I listened. One guy talked about how he'd lost everything to gambling: his marriage, his job, his house, started rebuilding at 53, living in his sister's basement, working retail. "People think you hit bottom and bounce back up," he said. "But it's not a bounce, it's a climb. Every day you choose to climb instead of fall." The image stuck with me. Climbing versus falling, choice versus momentum. I'd been falling for months, maybe years, maybe my entire life. Letting gravity take me, calling it fate, or bad luck, or temporal anomalies. But gravity was just a force. The fall was a choice I kept making. Christmas Day, I spent alone in my apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching the city from my window. Families walked by bundled against the cold. Couples held hands. The world continued its rotation, indifferent to my solitude. My phone buzzed. A text from Mira. "Merry Christmas, Tyler. Hope you're doing okay." Just that. No judgment, no warmth, no invitation to respond, just a simple acknowledgement that I existed, that she was thinking of me despite everything. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Merry Christmas. You too." She didn't reply. That was okay. It was enough that she'd reached out, that some part of her still remembered the friendship we'd been building before I'd broken it. New Year's Eve found me at Marcus's apartment in Brooklyn. A small party with his boyfriend and a few other friends from the coffee shop community. We drank sparkling cider instead of champagne. Marcus's boyfriend was also in AA and played board games and watched the ball drop on TV. When midnight hit, everyone cheered and kissed their partners and made toasts to new beginnings. I raised my glass and said nothing, just felt the weight of another year starting, another chance to do better. "What's your resolution?" Marcus asked later, while we were cleaning up. "To stop treating my life like a performance." "That's a good one." He bagged empty bottles, tied the bag closed. "Specific goals? Go to class, see my therapist, stop drinking, make choices based on who I want to be instead of who I was." Past tense? I'd slipped. Talking about my first life always made my grammar weird. To who I'm afraid of becoming. Marcus accepted this. "Those are good goals. Achievable. Just remember, you'll fuck up sometimes. That's part of being human. The trick is not to let the fuck-ups become the whole story." We finished cleaning while his boyfriend played music, something electronic and hopeful, the kind of sound that promised possibility. Outside, Brooklyn celebrated in its own way. Less ostentatious than Manhattan, but no less alive. I took the subway home as the city transitioned from December 31st, 2019 to January 1st, 2020. The train was full of drunk people celebrating, couples kissing, friends laughing. I sat among them, sober and alone, and felt something that wasn't quite happiness, but wasn't despair either. Acceptance, maybe, of where I was, of what I'd done, of the work still ahead. My apartment was cold when I got home. I turned up the heat, made tea, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The violation history was still there. Future crimes in present databases, temporal paradoxes I'd stopped trying to understand. But they felt less overwhelming now. Less like fate and more like information, a map of where I shouldn't go. I created a new document and titled it Goals Spring 2020. Wrote out my resolutions in concrete terms. Attend every class, meet with Dr. Rodriguez weekly, no alcohol, finish semester with GPA above 3.5, apply for summer internships in digital media. Then I added one more. Rebuild friendship with Mira. No expectations, no agenda, just honest presence. It felt achievable, small enough to be real, significant enough to matter. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Through my window, I could see the city settling into the new year, lights going dark as people found their way home, or to bed, or to wherever the night took them. I had no idea what 2020 would bring. In my first life, I had spent it grinding streams, building an audience, making choices that would lead to partner status and eventual destruction. But that was a path I'd already walked. This time, I could choose differently. This time, I could climb. The semester started cold. January in New York had a particular quality of misery. The holidays over, spring still months away. Nothing but gray skies and frozen streets stretching toward an uncertain future. I walked to class through winds that cut through my coat, attended lectures about digital culture and media theory, submitted assignments on time. Small victories, daily climbs, doctor. Neo Rodriguez and I worked through my relationship with performance, with validation, with the need to measure my worth in external metrics. She gave me homework. Go one day without checking social media, then 2 days, then a week. But I'm a digital media student, I'd protested. Social media is literally part of my coursework. Then make it intentional, she'd said. Professional only. No doom scrolling, no comparing yourself to others, no seeking validation through likes and shares. It was harder than I'd expected. I'd spent my first life, and the first months of my second, constantly connected, constantly consuming, constantly performing. Learning to exist without that feedback loop felt like learning to breathe underwater. But I did it. One day became 2, became a week, became a month. My anxiety decreased, my focus improved, and I slept better. In February, I saw Mira at a campus art show. She had 3 pieces displayed. Digital paintings she'd created on stream, printed and framed, showcasing the growth of her channel. They were beautiful, intricate, worthy of the crowd gathered around them. I almost left without approaching, but I'd written in my goals document, honest presence, no performance, just being. So I waited until the crowd thinned, then walked over. These are incredible, I said. Mira turned, surprise flickering across her face before settling into careful neutrality. Tyler, hi. Hi. We stood awkwardly, the art between us both barrier and bridge. I've been watching your channel, not in a creepy way. I lurk, anonymous. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing well. Her voice was measured, not warm, but not hostile either. Tucker built the channel to 5,000 followers, getting regular commissions. It's slow growth, but it's mine. It's impressive. Thank you. Silence stretched between us. Around us, other visitors moved through the gallery, discussing art and meaning and the technical skill on display. I searched for words that would bridge the gap between where we'd been and where we were now. I'm sorry, I said finally, for everything. For using you to make myself feel better. For not being honest about the account. For prioritizing my need for redemption over your actual well-being. Mira studied me, her artist's eye taking in details I probably wasn't aware of showing. I got your email, the long one from December. You didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. It was honest. Maybe the first time you'd been fully honest with me. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but thoughtfully. Are you doing better? I'm trying, seeing a therapist, stop drinking, actually attending class and doing the work instead of just existing in academic purgatory. That's good. It doesn't fix what I did. No, it doesn't. But it's something. Mira turned back to her art, studying her own work with critical distance. I've been thinking a lot about trust, about how you build it and how easily it breaks, and I realized that I never fully trusted you, even when we were friends. There was always this sense that you were performing, that I was seeing a character instead of a person. You weren't wrong? I know. That's what made it worse. I wanted to believe in the version of you that was present and helpful and caring. But some part of me always knew it was a show. The words stung because they were true. I had been performing Tyler Chen, reformed friend, for months, playing the role of someone who'd changed without actually doing the work of change. I don't know how to not perform, I admitted. It's all I know. Streaming, content creation, curating identity for consumption. It's been my life for years. Then learn. You're young enough to figure it out. Mira smiled slightly. Well, you're 24. I guess that's young enough. If only she knew. But that was knowledge I'd never share, a burden I'd carry alone. Can we start over? I asked. Not as friends, not yet, but as people who know each other, who occasionally exist in the same space without it being weird. Mira considered this. Acquaintances? Sure. Acquaintances. I can do acquaintances. She checked her phone, then gathered her things. I have to run, but Tyler, thank you for the apology, for actually trying to change instead of just talking about it. She left before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of art enthusiasts and culture consumers, leaving me alone with her printed artwork and the feeling that maybe, I'd taken one small step up instead of down. March brought the first hints of spring, trees budding in parks, days growing longer, the city shaking off winter's grip. I got an internship at a small digital marketing agency in Midtown, doing social media management for clients who sold everything from organic coffee to sustainable fashion. It wasn't glamorous, but it was professional experience that didn't involve streaming or content creation. I was learning to exist offline. April 15th, 2020, my 25th birthday, or my 33rd, depending on how you counted. 1 year since I'd woken up in this timeline, hungover and confused, carrying 8 extra years of memory I didn't know what to do with. I spent it quietly. Dinner with Marcus and his boyfriend, a small celebration, no alcohol, just food and conversation, and the comfortable presence of people who knew me in this timeline, unburdened by my future history. "You seem better," Marcus said while we waited for dessert. "More settled." "I'm trying. Trying is working." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and looked at the violation history one more time. The dates were the same, future events logged in present databases. But they felt different now, not like destiny or fate, but like a map of roads I'd chosen not to travel. March 15th, 2024 would come eventually, the date of my first violation in the original timeline, a drunken rant on stream that had crossed the line into hateful conduct. But this time, I wouldn't be streaming, wouldn't be drunk, wouldn't be the person who'd make that choice. The violations were fixed in the database, but I wasn't fixed in time. I could choose differently. Every day, every moment, every decision a chance to climb instead of fall. I closed the laptop and looked out at the city, lights stretching toward horizons I couldn't see. Somewhere out there, Mira was probably streaming, creating art for her 5,000 followers, building something authentic and hers. Somewhere out there, Marcus was closing up the coffee shop, his boyfriend waiting to walk him home. Somewhere out there, millions of people were living their lives, making choices, climbing or falling or drifting sideways through existence. And here I was, 25 years old, carrying memories of being 32, trying to figure out who Tyler Chen could become if he stopped performing and started being. It wasn't a resolution, it wasn't a dramatic transformation, it was just a door opening slightly, light filtering through, the possibility that maybe, I could be someone different this time. I went to bed early, sober, alone, but not lonely. Through my window, the city hummed its eternal song, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt like I was finally starting to learn the melody. October 2021. I'm standing in Mira's new apartment in Williamsburg, helping her set up her streaming room. She'd moved here last month after her channel hit 50,000 followers, after the commission work became sustainable enough to quit her day job, after she'd proven that slow growth and authentic content could build something real. Her space smells like fresh paint and possibility. We're mounting lights, running cables, creating a setup that's fully hers in a way my old equipment never was. "Higher on the left," she directs, watching me position a ring light. I adjust it. "Like this?" "Perfect." We work in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from rebuilding trust slowly over 18 months. We're not best friends, probably never will be, but we're something. Acquaintances who evolved into friends who understand each other's boundaries, who show up without expectation, who exist together without performance. "Did you see Tyler's latest violation got overturned?" she asks casually. I freeze. "What?" "The Tyler_Chen account. One of those old violations finally got appealed successfully." She shows me her phone, an email from Twitch support, informing her that a violation from the account's history had been reviewed and removed. March 2024. Hateful conduct. Apparently someone at Twitch finally noticed it was dated in the future and flagged it as a database error. I take her phone, read the email carefully. It's true. 1 violation removed, account status partially restored. Not enough to lift the elevated risk flag, not enough to get partner status, but enough to prove that the system could be changed. I search for words. That's good. "It's weird," Mira says, taking her phone back. "Oh, all those violations are dated years in the future, like someone predicted everything you'd do wrong before you did it." "Maybe it's a glitch." "Maybe." She doesn't sound convinced. Or maybe the universe works in stranger ways than we understand. We finish the setup in silence. When her streaming room is ready, Mira orders pizza and we eat sitting on her floor, backs against the wall, watching the Williamsburg sunset paint her windows orange and gold. I've been thinking about forgiveness, she says suddenly, about what it means to forgive someone who hasn't actually done the things you're forgiving them for. My heart rate increases. Mira, I'm not saying I know your whole story. I probably never will, but I know you've been working hard to be different, to choose better. And that counts for something. Does it? Yeah. She finishes her pizza, wipes her hands on a napkin. It counts for a lot. We sit together as evening becomes night, the city lighting up outside her window, and I feel something like peace. Not resolution. The violations still exist. The database still holds my future crimes. And March 2024 will come eventually. But I have time. Years to prove that the person logged in those violations isn't the person I'm becoming. Thanks, I say quietly. For what? For giving me a chance to be better, even when I didn't deserve it. Mira smiles. We all deserve chances, Tyler. It's what we do with them that matters. March 15th, 2024. I'm sitting in a coffee shop. Not Marcus's place, he moved to Portland last year, watching the date tick over on my laptop. March 15th, 2024. The day that, in another timeline, I'd gotten my first violation for hateful conduct on stream. But I'm not streaming. Haven't streamed in years. The Tyler_Chen account still exists, flagged and restricted, a monument to a future that didn't happen. Some of the violations have been overturned, 6 in total, after Twitch finally started removing the obviously impossible future-dated ones. The rest remain, logged evidence of crimes I never committed. My phone buzzes. A text from Mira. Happy Violation Day! You successfully didn't commit hate speech on stream. I laugh despite myself. She's the only person who knows the significance of this date, who understands what it means to reach a moment you thought would define you and find yourself somewhere else entirely. Celebrating by being a normal person, I text back. Boring but healthy. I approve. I close my laptop and look out the window at a city that feels both familiar and new. I'm 29 years old, have a job in digital marketing I actually enjoy. I'm taking night classes toward a master's degree. See Dr. Rodriguez monthly instead of weekly. Maintenance rather than crisis management. I'm not perfect. Still struggle with the need for external validation sometimes. Still catch myself performing instead of being. Still carry the weight of 2 lifetimes in ways that show up in therapy and late-night anxiety spirals. But I'm here, alive, sober, making choices that diverge from the path I walked before. The violations will keep coming. Dates approaching that match my old timeline. August 2025, November 2025. Each one a test, a chance to choose differently, to prove that databases might be fixed, but people can change. I think about the Tyler Chen who died drunk on the FDR at 32. Wonder what he'd think of this version, this timeline, this life I'm building from the wreckage of his choices. Would he recognize himself? Would he approve? Probably not. We were different people. Wanted different things, measured success in incompatible metrics. But that's okay. His life ended. Mine continues. And every day I choose to climb instead of fall is a day his story loses power. My phone buzzes again. Marcus, checking in from Portland, thinking of you today. Remember, you're not the person you were afraid of becoming. I read the message twice, let it settle into the spaces where doubt usually lives. He's right. I'm not that person. Might never have been, might never become, who might exist forever in the quantum state of someone who did and didn't make those choices, depending on which timeline you observe. But in this timeline, the one that matters, the one I'm actually living, I'm just Tyler Chen, 29 years old, climbing daily, learning slowly, being honestly. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, that feels like enough. February 14th, 2027. The date of my permanent ban in the original timeline. The date that 2 weeks later, I died drunk behind the wheel. I marked it in my calendar months ago. A reminder and a milestone. But when the day arrives, I'm in Mira's streaming room again. Her setup has evolved, professional lighting and multiple cameras, and a backdrop she commissioned from another artist, helping her prepare for a charity stream. Nervous? I ask, adjusting her camera angle. terrified. She's fidgeting with her tablet, checking and rechecking settings. $50,000 goal is ambitious. What if we don't hit it? You'll hit it. I've watched her channel grow for years, seen the community she's built, the authenticity that draws people in and keeps them engaged. Your viewers love you. They'll show up. The stream starts at 7. I watch from the back of the room as Mira explains the charity, an organization supporting art therapy for kids in hospitals, and sets the goal. Her avatar dances on screen while she draws, creating a collaborative piece with her community, each donation tier unlocking different elements. By 9, they've hit 20,000. By midnight, 40. The chat moves too fast to read, people sharing stories about art saving their lives, about finding community in Mira's streams, about the difference her content makes. At 2 a.m., they hit the goal. $50,000 for art therapy, raised by a community Mira built from 0 followers, without shortcuts, without borrowed platforms, just authentic presence and consistent effort. She cries when the goal ticker ticks over. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, the emotional release of achieving something that matters. I hand her tissues and stay quiet. Let her have the moment without commentary or performance. When she finally ends the stream, we sit in exhausted silence. The room's still bright with professional lighting, but the energy shifted from performance to aftermath. Thank you, she says, for being here, for helping, for being different than you were. Thanks for letting me try. We order late-night Thai food and eat sitting on her floor like we did years ago. Except this time feels earned. We're not acquaintances anymore, not quite friends in the way we might have been if I'd never fucked up, but we're something, 2 people who exist together honestly, who know each other's patterns and boundaries, who show up without expectation. Do you ever regret it? Mira asks. Not streaming anymore? I think about this honestly. Sometimes. I miss the creativity, the immediate feedback, the feeling of building something, but I don't miss who I became doing it. And I like who I'm becoming not doing it better. Healthy perspective. Therapy works, she laughs. Imagine that. We finish eating as the city transitions toward dawn, that liminal space between night and day when anything feels possible. Mira needs to sleep. She's exhausted from 6 hours of streaming, but I'm wired. So full of the secondhand energy of watching someone succeed. I walk home through Brooklyn as the sun rises, painting the borough in colors that feel earned. This date, February 14th, 2027, was supposed to mark my ending. Instead, it marks a beginning, or continuation, or whatever you call the daily work of being better. The Tyler_Chen account still exists somewhere in Twitch's database, flagged and restricted, carrying violations that will continue approaching their dates until the last one, September 2026, passes. I'll reach each date, hold my breath, and prove that databases might be fixed but lives are flexible. I'm 32 years old for the second time, the age I was when I died, but this time, I'm sober, employed, working toward a future instead of running from a past. This time I'm climbing instead of falling. This time I'm alive. And as the sun continues rising over Brooklyn, painting my path in gold, I feel something that might be gratitude, or peace, or simply the quiet satisfaction of choosing differently every day until the choices become habit, become identity, become who you actually are, instead of who you feared becoming. I'm not perfect, still carry 2 lifetimes in one body, still struggle with performance versus presence, still see Dr. Rodriguez monthly to process the impossible weight of living twice. But I'm here, present, being rather than performing. And that I'm learning is enough. The light unfolds across the city like a promise the universe makes every morning, indifferent to our choices, but present regardless. I walk home through streets I know in 2 timelines, heading toward a future I'm building instead of repeating. The climb continues. It always will. But I'm climbing, and today that's enough.